The Northwoods Asylum incident. James Pownall was a respected surgeon, the proprietor of Northwoods Asylum, and once the mayor of Calne, England. In the 1870s, he moved among the highest circles of Victorian society, trusted by patients and colleagues alike. But behind his professional demeanor lay a troubling history. Pownall had experienced several bouts of mental instability throughout his career. In 1872, his behavior became so erratic that he was certified insane and committed to an asylum for treatment. After months of confinement, doctors declared him recovered and released him to resume his practice. Pownall was alone with Louisa Cook, a 15-year-old servant girl who worked in his household. Without warning or apparent provocation, he retrieved a straight razor from his medical bag. In one swift motion, he grabbed the girl from behind and sliced through her throat with surgical precision. When household staff discovered the scene, Pownall was standing calmly beside the body, razor still in hand. At his trial, medical experts testified about his mental state. The jury found him not guilty by reason of insanity. Instead of the gallows, Pownall was sentenced to Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum, where he would spend the remainder of his life. The case became notorious in Victorian England, raising disturbing questions about how society determined who was sane enough to practice medicine. The Summerlands Hospital incident. Jessica Powell was 20 years old when she was admitted to Summerlands Hospital in Yeovil, England, in August 2020. She had been struggling with mental health issues and was placed in a general psychiatric ward while awaiting transfer to a more specialized treatment facility. The ward was chronically understaffed, with a ratio of 1 nurse to 17 patients during most shifts. On August 15th, Jessica entered a therapy room on the second floor of the facility at approximately 3:45 p.m. Security camera footage later showed she tried to open the window, likely attempting to leave the hospital grounds. The window was designed with a restrictive opening of just 10 centimeters, about the width of a human hand, to prevent patients from absconding. Jessica managed to force her upper body through the narrow gap, but became firmly wedged at the hips. By then, Jessica had suffered catastrophic organ failure from dehydration, exposure, and positional asphyxia. Emergency medical teams freed her, but found her with no pulse and a body temperature of just 28 degrees. Resuscitation attempts failed. The subsequent inquest revealed that staff had failed to conduct required 15-minute checks on Jessica's whereabouts. The therapy room had been marked as locked in the security log when it was actually accessible to patients. Her death certificate listed the cause as multiple organ failure secondary to environmental exposure and positional compromise. The Broadmoor dining room incident. Richard Loudwell was a 60-year-old patient at Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility in Berkshire, England. On April 25, 2004, he entered the ward dining room supervised by 3 staff members who remained stationed near the entrance. At a nearby table sat Peter Bryan, a 35-year-old patient with a history of extreme violence. Bryan had been released from seclusion just 30 minutes earlier, despite notes in his file indicating continued homicidal ideation. Security cameras captured Bryan watching Loudwell for approximately 7 minutes before making his move. As Loudwell bent forward to eat his meal, Bryan suddenly lunged across the room. As Loudwell collapsed, Bryan wrapped a shoelace around his neck and pulled it tight. The attack lasted 63 seconds before staff intervened. When orderlies finally restrained him, Bryan calmly stated, "I wanted to eat him." Hospital records later revealed Bryan had told a nurse the previous day that he was hungry and needed to be fed. These statements were not flagged as concerning. Loudwell was transported to Frimley Park Hospital with catastrophic brain injuries. He never regained consciousness and died on May 15, 2004. 20 days after the attack, the autopsy revealed bleeding in 3 distinct brain regions and compression damage to his spinal cord from the ligature. The subsequent investigation found that Broadmoor staff had failed to properly assess Bryan's risk level before releasing him from seclusion. They had also positioned themselves too far from high-risk patients during mealtime. The Central State Hospital incident. Irvo Otieno was a 28-year-old man with a history of mental illness when he was transported to Central State Hospital in Dinwiddie County, Virginia on March 6, 2023. Earlier that day, he had been taken into custody during a mental health crisis. At approximately 4:19 p.m., 7 sheriff's deputies escorted him into the hospital's admissions area. Hospital surveillance video captured what happened next. The deputies led Otieno, who was handcuffed and shackled at the ankles, into a small intake room. When he appeared reluctant to enter, the officers forced him to the ground. Within seconds, all 7 deputies were on top of him, using their body weight to hold him face down on the floor. 3 hospital staff members soon joined them. For 12 minutes, Otieno was pinned beneath the weight of up to 10 people simultaneously. The video showed at least one officer's knee on his neck, while others held down his legs and arms. Despite being severely outnumbered and restrained, the officers continued applying pressure to his body. At 4:31 p.m., the group finally stood up. Otieno was motionless. Medical staff attempted CPR, but it was too late. His body showed no signs of life. The medical examiner later determined he died from from positional and mechanical asphyxia. Essentially, he had been crushed to death. The autopsy revealed blunt force injuries to his head, neck, torso, and extremities. Oxygen had been unable to reach his brain and organs as the weight on his chest prevented his lungs from expanding. His death was ruled a homicide. Within days, all 7 deputies and 3 hospital employees were charged with second-degree murder. The Commonwealth attorney described the video as showing a demonstration of cruelty by those sworn to protect the vulnerable. The Kanagawa Psychiatric Facility incident. Kelly Savage was a 27-year-old English teacher from New Zealand working in Japan when he was admitted to a psychiatric hospital in Kanagawa Prefecture. After experiencing a manic episode, his family had sought medical help, expecting standard psychiatric care. What followed instead was a fatal example of Japan's controversial psychiatric restraint protocols. Upon admission, hospital staff deemed Savage agitated and immediately placed him in physical restraints. Metal cuffs were fastened around both wrists and both ankles, with an additional belt secured tightly around his waist. These restraints fixed him to a bed in a spread eagle position that severely limited his movement. According to hospital records, he remained in this position continuously for 10 days. Nurses noted his breathing had become labored and his legs had swollen significantly. Despite these warning signs, the restraints were not removed. Savage went into cardiac arrest. His heart had stopped completely. Emergency resuscitation temporarily restored his heartbeat, but the prolonged oxygen deprivation had caused irreversible brain damage. He never regained consciousness. Kelly Savage was pronounced dead. The autopsy suggested deep vein thrombosis had developed in his immobilized legs, leading to a fatal pulmonary embolism when blood clots traveled to his lungs. Medical experts noted that prolonged physical restraint is a well-documented risk factor for this condition, with patients restrained for more than 72 hours at particularly high risk. Japan's psychiatric hospitals routinely use physical restraints on up to 12,000 patients daily, often for extended periods, a practice condemned by the United Nations as potentially amounting to torture. The Napa State Hospital incident. Donna Gross was a 54-year-old psychiatric technician who had worked at Napa State Hospital in California for 14 years. On October 23, 2010, she returned to the hospital grounds after her dinner break at approximately 5:15 p.m. She entered an outdoor courtyard that connected several buildings of the 138-acre campus. The area was accessible to both staff and certain patients who had earned ground privileges. As Gross walked through the fading autumn light, she encountered Jesse Willard Massey, a 37-year-old patient with a history of violent crime. Massey had been committed to Napa after being found not guilty by reason of insanity for previous assault. Despite his record, he had been granted a grounds pass that allowed him unsupervised access to the courtyard during daylight hours. Security cameras captured Gross entering the courtyard but lost sight of her behind a building. What happened next was pieced together from physical evidence and Massey's later statements. Massey approached Gross and demanded money and her jewelry. When she resisted, he forced her into a secluded area between buildings. There, Massey strangled Gross with his bare hands, applying pressure to her neck until she lost consciousness. Medical examiners later found her hyoid bone had been fractured by the force applied. After she collapsed, Massey took her jewelry and $2 in cash from her pocket. A staff member discovered Gross's body at 6:20 p.m. Resuscitation attempts failed. Massey was found in his ward, still carrying Gross's possessions. The murder exposed critical security flaws at the hospital. Staff had complained for years about working alone in isolated areas accessible to potentially dangerous patients. Gross had been equipped with only a personal alarm that failed to transmit from her location. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.